We are back on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, now in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM, and now across the whole nation 3 times a week on knookmedia.com. Our guest by phone, James Lacy, author of Taxifornia, Liberals' Laboratory to Bankrupt America, and they're doing an excellent job of it. So, Jim, we were talking about businesses fleeing in droves from the state. You know, I remember, I'm also an insurance broker, and I remember a couple of years ago we had the problem with workers' comp, and because of the high rates, companies were leaving in droves, and we're back to that scenario again. I had a company, I can't mention their name, but their workers' comp bill was $75,000. They left and went to the south, and the same bill was $7,500. So I mean,
yeah, it's
silly.
Just ridiculous. Arnold Schwarzenegger, sadly, was a failure as governor, and it had everything to do with the fact, as I outline in my book, Taxifornia, that he made a deal with the California Teachers Association that he wouldn't push for reforms in teacher pay or teacher pensions, or to try and have student test scores used in teacher evaluations in return for them basically not impeding his ability to try and take on some legislative changes. So what did he do? The only thing that Schwarzenegger really did of any significance was to make a very modest reform early on in the workers' compensation regulations. But as you say yourself, it was no comparison to what was needed to other states. It's kind of like you say that it was 75,000, 7,500. It's kind of like Proposition 13. You hear liberals complaining that Proposition 13 is just terrible, that it's cut funding, that it's a systemic problem, that it's held back government from getting necessary funds to be able to engage in services. But the reality is that Proposition 13, as important and as needed as it was in 1978, didn't really drastically cut property taxes in relationship to other states. It really didn't, Marty. All it did was just slow down the growth.
Right.
Stephen Moore has written about this in the Wall Street Journal. Even with Proposition 13, which has slowed down the ability of government to raise property taxes, on average, California's property taxes are still higher than the rest of the nation. We're in the top 50% of taxers of real property. So, when we say that we might have made strides with Proposition 13 or with workers' compensation, the reality is that we're still greatly overtaxed, and there's still way too much litigation and government regulation. And a great example of it is the Environmental Act and the Coastal Act. Here we had Donald Trump come in to the states 8 years ago, and decided that he was going to make an investment, and he was going to develop a big resort in Rancho Palos Verdes, which is in Los Angeles County, beautiful area overlooking the ocean. And the first thing that he wanted to do was to be certain to have a big American flag flying over that beautiful coastal community. And, it took him years and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get the flagpole approved, just the flagpole. It had to go through the city. It had to go through the Coastal Commission. And the reason is that there was a claim that the display of the American flag was a blight on the environment and that it was going to be disrupting the view plane of other residents nearby. Well, that's not why we have the coastal laws. The coastal laws are not intended to stop the displays of patriotism, even normal displays of patriotism. Their intention is to provide access to the ocean area and to ensure that attempts are made to keep the coastal environment clean. So we see these rules being just used for ridiculous purposes. Google didn't feel that they were being served well enough by the San Jose airport. I discussed this in my book, Taxifornia, as well. So they decided to not wait for the municipal or local governments to expand San Jose airport. They came in with a proposal where they would privately fund expansion of the private commercial plane area of San Jose Airport, which would be a boon to all other travel along those lines. And the government decided to work with them, and no sooner did they get started on it than the project was ground to a halt under the Environmental Quality Act, not for environmental quality issues, but because one of the contractors who had come in second on the bidding decided to leverage the environmental rules to try and get an economic advantage. And it's just absolutely terrible that our rules are being used in ways that they were never intended. But this is a real problem in California, and we really need to have a much more reasoned approach as we look at these rules, because there's too much business flight, there's too much jobs flight. Do you know, Marty, that since the year 1990, there has been absolutely no job growth in Los Angeles? Zero.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. We're having a conversation with James Lacy, author of Taxifornia, Liberals' Laboratory to Bankrupt America. That wouldn't surprise me at all, Jim. It's it's crazy. I want to get back to your book real quick for a moment. Congressman Issa, who I met the other night, he did the foreword in the book, didn't he?
He sure did. He's very good congressman. He's been doing a great job on many of the problems in Washington, D.C., and I was delighted that he would write the introduction for me.
Yeah, he did a great job. And where can people get your book? What's the easiest way to get it?
The easiest way to get it is to go to Amazon.com and just put Taxifornia in the search engine, and it'll pop up. It's also available at BarnesandNoble.com. But Amazon.com and then putting Taxifornia in the search engine is probably the quickest way to get the information and get the book out.
Mm-hmm. And if we've got about 3 minutes left, but I just have to say this. A mutual friend of ours, Bruce Hershenson, if you talk to him before I do, tell him I said hello.
Oh, Bruce is a tremendous guy. It's too bad we don't have him in the Senate. He would have been doing a fantastic job for us.
Oh, can you imagine him in the Senate instead of Boxer? You know, and that would just be incredible. Yeah, definitely incredible.
He's a high-quality guy. He's still writing books.
Mm-hmm.
He's got one that he's working on now. Year before last, he had one called Obama's Globe, mm-hmm. which was absolutely tremendous and came out actually before the Benghazi situation, and it talked about not focusing on the bottom line. Bruce Hershenson's a fantastic guy.
Oh, yeah, and he's still teaching over at Pepperdine. He invited me to show up at one of his classes, and it's just a question of me getting down there, but because I love that area down there. I do a lot of bike riding down there on the beach.
Well, you ought to do it. You're a professor yourself at the University of Phoenix. You should run with that academic side. You're a smart guy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Jim. I always thought you were a good judge of character. and actually, you're an SC grad, so that makes you doubly a good guy.
And I went to Pepperdine Law, so I'm in sync there with Hershenson.
And you worked for the Reagan administration at one time.
I did. I was general counsel of the Consumer Product Safety Commission from 87 to 89, and I actually worked all 8 years in the Reagan administration, starting at the Commerce Department, working for Malcolm Baldrige. And, I learned so much in the Reagan administration about economic growth. Reagan said, doggone it, I'm going to cut taxes, and he did, and we went through a brief recession in 1982, and from that point forward, Reagan's tax policies and anti-big regulation policies created the largest growth in our economy in our history post-war, even bigger than the surge when Clinton was president under Republican control of Congress. It was the longest period of sustained growth in history in a non-wartime era. And if California could adopt these policies, if we could see our way, the people need to have the information. If they have the information that's in my book, if they understand, they'll reject taxes. L.A. voters rejected a tax increase on the ballot in 2013. Richmond voters did. El Monte voters did. If they have the information and understands what's at stake, to create economic growth, they'll make the right decisions. And for that reason, even though I've got a lot of pessimistic information in Taxifornia, I'm optimistic because I believe if Californians have the information, they'll make the right decisions, and we can get through this rough patch.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jim. We got to have you back for the full hour next time with Clay around. The name of the book is Taxifornia, Liberals' Laboratory to Bankrupt America, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Jim, thank you again for the time. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Marty. It's been a pleasure.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk 1180.